Jack Miller stood at the viewport of the massive space station, his hand resting on the warm fur of Max, his German shepherd. The dog sat calmly beside him, watching the stars with what Jack liked to imagine was the same wonder he felt. The Galactic Confederation space station horizon stretched around them, a marvel of alien engineering that still made Jack's breath catch whenever he really thought about where he was. "Come on, boy," Jack said softly. "Time to meet some more aliens." Max gave a soft woof in response, standing and shaking himself before following at Jack's heel. The dog's military-grade service vest identified him as an Earth Forces companion animal. But that didn't stop the stares from the various alien species they passed in the wide corridors. Jack had been aboard the station for just 3 weeks. As Earth's newly appointed cultural attaché, it was his job to help integrate humans into the complex political web of the Galactic Confederation. Humanity was the newest member of this vast alliance, having been discovered only 5 years earlier. Their rapid technological advancement had impressed most species, but cultural differences remained a constant source of tension, none more so than humans' relationship with their pets. "Lieutenant Miller," called a melodic voice from behind him. Jack turned to see Alara, his Zelleran liaison. The tall, blue-skinned alien moved with graceful steps, her forearms making delicate gestures as she approached. "The Zarkon delegation has requested your presence at their morning briefing," Jack nodded. "Did they specifically request I come alone?" Alara's large eyes darted to Max. "They did not specify, but—" Her voice trailed off. "Then Max comes with me," Jack said firmly. "Earth's policy is clear on service animals." The Zelleran's skin rippled with what Jack had come to recognize as discomfort. "The Zarkon find your—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Animal companions most disturbing. All the more reason for them to get used to Max." Jack replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Cultural exchange goes both ways. As they walked toward the Zarkon sector, Jack noticed how other aliens reacted to Max. The gelatinous Marigi oozed away quickly, their bodies rippling with alarm. The insectoid Vril clicked their mandibles rapidly, a sign of curiosity. The bird-like Avari simply ignored them, having come to accept the strange human custom. The Zarkon were different. The tall, reptilian species considered themselves warriors above all else. Their scaled bodies bore ceremonial scars of battle, and their amber eyes held what seemed like permanent contempt for lesser species, which in their view was everyone else. When Jack and Max entered the Zarkon briefing room, the temperature noticeably dropped. 6 Zarkon warriors stood at attention, while Commander Vexthor sat at the head of the table. The commander's dark green scales shimmered under the lights, the red stripes across his face marking him as a veteran of multiple campaigns. "Lieutenant Miller," Vexthor said, his voice a low rumble. "You bring your prey animal to a formal meeting." Again, Jack took his seat, gesturing for Max to lie down beside him. "Max is not prey, Commander. He's my companion and partner." Vexthor's inner eyelid flicked across his eye, a sign of annoyance. "You humans and your strange attachments to lesser species. You keep them as slaves yet call them family. Most contradictory." "Not slaves," Jack corrected patiently. "The relationship between humans and dogs goes back thousands of years. We evolved together, helped each other survive." Another Zarkon, Subcommander Srel, leaned forward. "We have studied your Earth history. These creatures were wolves, predators. You neutered their instincts and made them weak, dependent. A true warrior species would never allow such manipulation." Jack had heard this argument before. "We didn't just change them, Sub-Commander. They changed us too. Human civilization might not exist without dogs. They helped us hunt, protected our homes, warned us of danger. Today, they serve in our military, find survivors in disasters, guide the blind, detect diseases before our best machines can. The bond goes far deeper than you realize." Vexthor made a dismissive gesture with his clawed hand. "Enough about primitive sentiment. We are here to discuss the situation in the Orion sector." The meeting proceeded tensely as they reviewed maps of a disputed region of space. Earth had established a research outpost on a mineral-rich planet the Zarkon considered within their territory. Neither side was willing to back down. As the discussion grew heated, Vexthor's voice rose. Your colony in the Orion Belt violates Zarkon ancestral claims. Max, previously relaxed at Jack's feet, raised his head at the aggressive tone. Jack placed a reassuring hand on the dog's neck. Vexthor noticed the gesture, and his scaled lips pulled back in what might have been a smile. Your creature senses tension. Perhaps it knows its master is in a precarious position. Max is trained to remain calm in all situations, Jack said evenly. And Earth is prepared to discuss fair terms for the Orion Belt. We've come with proposals for shared access to the resources. Shared access? Vexthor stood suddenly, towering over the table. Max immediately rose to a sitting position, alert but not aggressive. The Zarkon do not share what is rightfully ours. The other Zarkon warriors shifted their posture, hands drifting closer to the ceremonial blades at their sides. Jack felt the atmosphere change, becoming charged with potential violence. Perhaps, came a new voice from the doorway. We should all take time to consider multiple perspectives. Everyone turned to see Ambassador Frank Ellis enter with Susan Hayes, who had her therapy cat Mittens in a specialized carrier. The Zarkon visibly recoiled at the sight of another animal. 2 humans, 2 beasts, Vexthor growled. You mock our customs. Ambassador Ellis smiled diplomatically. Not at all, Commander. We respect your customs. We simply ask the same courtesy for ours. As Susan took a seat, she opened the carrier to let Mittens out. The orange tabby cat stretched lazily before settling on her lap. The Zarkon watched with a mixture of disgust and fascination. First canines, now felines. Srel muttered. Will you bring all of Earth's menagerie to official functions? Susan stroked Mittens gently. Therapy animals are recognized as essential for human psychological well-being during long space deployments. Vexthor's tail lashed once against the floor. Weakness. You rely on lesser beings for your mental stability. Jack noticed how the commander's eyes tracked Max's every movement, not with fear, but with something like puzzlement. Different species, different needs, Jack said simply. Not weakness, adaptation. The diplomatic dinner tonight will include representatives from all Confederation species, Ambassador Ellis said, changing the subject. We hope the Zarkon will attend despite our cultural differences. Vexthor's scales rippled along his neck, a sign Jack had learned indicated consideration. We will attend, but keep your creatures contained during the meal. As they left the meeting, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Max seemed to sense it too, staying, unusually close to his side. They're planning something, Susan whispered as they walked back to the human quarters. Did you see how they positioned themselves around the room? Jack nodded. Battle formation, I noticed. Behind them, unseen, Commander Vexthor watched the humans and their animals with calculating eyes. Tonight would change everything, and the humans' strange attachment to their pets would be their undoing. Jack walked through the arched doorway of the human quarters with Max following closely at his heels. The living space was designed to mimic Earth environments, with artificial sunlight streaming through fake windows, and the temperature set to a comfortable 72 degrees. It was the one place on the station where Jack truly felt at ease. Susan sat in the common area, Mittens curled up beside her as she reviewed documents on her tablet. She looked up when Jack entered. How's Max doing after that tense meeting? She asked, gesturing to the empty seat across from her. Jack sank into the chair and sighed. He's fine. More concerned about me, I think. He reached down to scratch behind Max's ears. The dog leaned into his touch, eyes half closing in contentment. I've been reviewing the Zarkon military history, Susan said, turning her tablet so Jack could see. Did you know they have no concept of animal companionship? Their planet had only predator and prey relationships. Nothing mutual. That explains a lot, Jack replied. They see our relationship with animals as unnatural. Max suddenly perked up, ears forward. looking toward the door seconds before it chimed. Jack nodded at the dog with appreciation. "Good. Boy, enter," he called out. The door slid open to reveal Dr. Leva, the Zelaran scientist who had been helping the human delegation understand Confederation technology. The tall blue-skinned alien ducked slightly to enter the room, all four of her arms carrying various equipment. "Lieutenant Miller, Ms. Hayes." Leva greeted them, her large eyes blinking rapidly, a sign of excitement or nervousness. Jack wasn't sure which. "I bring updated communication devices for tonight's dinner." As Leva set down her equipment, Mittens jumped off the couch and approached her curiously. The Zelaran froze, watching the cat with obvious fascination. "It's okay," Susan assured her. "Mittens is just saying hello." Leva slowly extended one of her lower hands, allowing the cat to sniff her blue fingers. Fascinating creatures. So small, yet so confident. When Mittens bumped her head against the alien's hand, Leva made a trilling sound of delight. "It requested physical contact." Jack smiled. "That means she likes you. Not all aliens react so positively to our pets." Leva's expression grew serious, her skin darkening to a deeper blue. "That is partly why I came." She lowered her voice, glancing toward the door. "The Zarkon have been asking unusual questions about human and animal physiology. Their interest seems concerning." "What kind of questions?" Jack asked, sitting up straighter. "About sensory capabilities, pain responses, bonding behaviors." Leva's four hands made nervous gestures. "They requested access to Earth's veterinary database." Susan frowned. "Why would they?" "I should not say more," Leva interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "The station has many ears, but please be cautious at tonight's dinner." She handed them each a small communication device. "These operate on a frequency the Zarkon cannot monitor. Keep them with you." After Leva left, Jack and Susan exchanged worried glances. "I don't like this," Susan said, attaching the new communicator to her uniform. "First the territorial dispute, now this weird interest in our pets." Jack nodded, his hand absently stroking Max's fur. "We need to be ready for anything tonight." The diplomatic dinner was held in the station's Grand Hall, a massive space designed to accommodate all member species of the Confederation. Floating lights hovered above long tables arranged in a semicircle. Each section was customized for the comfort of different alien physiologies: water tanks for the aquatic Morigi, perches for the bird-like Avari, and heat lamps for the reptilian. Zarkon. Jack and Max entered alongside Susan, who carried Mittens in her specialized carrier. They had agreed to respect the no animals during the meal request, but would keep their companions nearby in a designated area. "Lieutenant Miller," called Ambassador Ellis, waving them over. "I've arranged for your pets to stay in the observation alcove. They'll be comfortable and within sight." The alcove was a small space off to the side of the main hall, with cushions laid out and water bowls provided. Jack guided Max to the area, giving the hand signal for stay and guard. The German shepherd settled down obediently but remained alert, eyes scanning the room. Susan placed Mittens' carrier next to Max, opening it to let the cat explore the space. "Be good," she whispered, scratching under the cat's chin. As they joined the main tables, Jack noticed the Zarkon delegation watching them closely. Commander Vexthor sat at the head of their section, his amber eyes following Jack's movements. The dinner began with speeches from various ambassadors, each highlighting the importance of cooperation among the Confederation species. When it was Earth's turn, Ambassador Ellis spoke about humanity's gratitude for being welcomed into the galactic community. "We come with open hands and hearts," Ellis said, raising a glass in toast. "May our differences strengthen us rather than divide us." The other species raised their various drinking vessels in response, all except the Zarkon, who remained still, their scaled hands flat on the table. As the meal progressed, Jack kept glancing toward the alcove where Max and Mittens were staying. The dog remained in position, occasionally turning his head to track movement around the room. Nothing seemed amiss, yet Jack couldn't shake his unease. "Enjoying the festivities, Lieutenant?" The deep voice of Commander Vexthor suddenly came from behind him. Jack turned to find the Zarkon standing uncomfortably close. "Commander," Jack acknowledged with a nod. "The Confederation knows how to host a dinner." Vexthor's scaled lips pulled back in what might have been a smile. "Indeed. And you humans know how to follow rules when properly motivated. Your beasts remain contained." "As agreed," Jack replied evenly. "Though they're probably more comfortable there than we are here." The Zarkon made a sound like stones grinding together, their version of laughter. Comfort is irrelevant in matters of protocol. His clawed hand gripped Jack's shoulder briefly. "Enjoy the remainder of your meal, Lieutenant. Things will become much more interesting soon." Before Jack could ask what he meant, Vexthor moved away, signaling to his warriors who stood positioned around the perimeter of the room. They straightened subtly, hands moving to their belts. Jack caught Susan's eye across the table and tapped his new communicator twice. She nodded slightly, understanding his warning. In the alcove, Max had risen to his feet, ears forward, body tense. The dog's eyes were fixed on the Zarkon warriors, a low growl building in his throat. Beside him, Mittens had stopped grooming and now sat perfectly still, tail twitching. Ambassador Ellis was just beginning to discuss the Orion Belt situation when Commander Vexthor stood up abruptly. "Honored representatives of the Confederation," the Zarkon announced, his voice carrying across the hall. "The Zarkon Empire has tolerated human expansion long enough. As of this moment, we claim sole rights to the Orion Belt and all its resources." Shocked murmurs spread through the gathered aliens. Ambassador Ellis rose to his feet. "Commander, this is not the appropriate forum for—" "Silence!" Vexthor roared. "The time for talk has ended." At some unseen signal, every Zarkon warrior reached for their belts and pressed a device. A high-pitched whine filled the air, and suddenly all the lights in the hall flickered. Jack felt his standard communicator go dead at his hip, though the special one Leva had given him still hummed, with energy. "A localized EMP," he whispered to Susan. "They have just disabled all standard Confederation technology in the room." In the sudden confusion, the Zarkon warriors moved with practiced efficiency, surrounding the human delegation. Vexthor stepped forward, towering over Ambassador Ellis. "Consider yourselves honored guests of the Zarkon Empire," he announced coldly. "Until your government recognizes our claim to the Orion Belt, none of you will leave this station." In the alcove, unnoticed amid the chaos, Max stood rigid, watching as armed Zarkon approached his human. The dog's eyes never left Jack, waiting for a command that hadn't yet come. Chaos erupted in the Grand Hall as the Zarkon warriors moved to surround the human delegation. Alien representatives from other species backed away, some fleeing the room entirely. The Zelaran ambassador protested loudly, but her words were ignored as Zarkon guards blocked all exits. Jack caught Susan's eye across the room and tapped his special communicator twice. She nodded slightly and began edging toward the alcove where Max and Mittens waited. Jack did the same, moving slowly so as not to draw attention. "No one leaves," bellowed Commander Vexthor. "The human delegation will be escorted to secure quarters. The rest of you may return to your respective sections once we have established order." Ambassador Ellis stepped forward, his face red with anger. "This is an act of war, Commander. The Earth government will not stand for it." Vexthor's scaled lips pulled back in what passed for a smile among his kind. "Your Earth government cannot even communicate with you now. Our signal jammers are in place throughout the station. By the time your people realize something is wrong, the Orion Belt will be firmly under Zarkon control." Jack had nearly reached the alcove when a Zarkon warrior stepped into his path. "Return to your delegation, human," the warrior growled. Jack raised his hands in a placating gesture. "I need to secure my service animal. He's trained for emergency protocols." The Zarkon's amber eyes narrowed. "Your beast is not a priority." "He is to me," Jack insisted. "And an agitated service animal could cause problems you don't want to deal with." After a moment of consideration, the warrior grunted and stepped aside. Jack hurried to the alcove where Max waited, alert and tense. The dog's eyes were fixed on him, ears forward. Susan had also managed to reach the alcove and was gathering Mittens into her carrier. "What's the plan?" she whispered. "We need to get to the communication hub," Jack replied quietly, kneeling beside Max and pretending to check his vest. "If we can bypass their jammers, we can alert Earth." Susan nodded. "But how do we get out of here?" Jack glanced around, noting that most of the Zarkon were focused on the main human delegation. Dr. Leva mentioned maintenance tunnels that run behind the section. There should be an access panel near the food service area. He leaned close to Max, speaking in the special command tone he'd been trained to use. "Alert mode, Max. Quiet guard." The dog's posture shifted subtly, becoming even more attentive but still controlled. As the Zarkon began herding the human delegation toward the exit, Jack and Susan slipped behind a decorative pillar, then hurried to the service area. A Morigi server was there, its gelatinous body quivering with distress. "Please," Susan said to the alien, "we need to use the maintenance access." The Morigi's translucent body rippled. "Humans should not be here. Dangerous times." "More dangerous if we don't get help," Jack said firmly. "The access panel?" The Morigi extended a pseudopod toward a section of wall that looked identical to the rest. "Touch 3 times in triangle pattern." Jack did as instructed, and a previously invisible panel slid open, revealing a narrow tunnel bathed in dim blue light. "Thank you," he said. "Tell no one you saw us." The Morigi's body compressed in what might have been a nod. "Zarkon bad for all species. Go quickly." They slipped into the tunnel. Jack first, then Max, then Susan with mittens in her carrier. The panel closed behind them, leaving them in the eerie blue glow of emergency lighting. "These tunnels run throughout the station," Jack whispered. "The communication hub should be 2 levels up and across the central axis." They moved quietly through the narrow passage, Max padding silently ahead, occasionally stopping to listen. The dog's senses were far more acute than any human's, making him an ideal scout. Whenever they approached a junction, Max would go ahead, then return with his body language telling Jack whether the path was clear. "He's remarkable," Susan observed after Max warned them of approaching maintenance droids. "The Zarkon have no idea what they're missing, do they?" "They see only weakness in partnership," Jack replied. "To them, power comes from domination, not cooperation." After 20 minutes of careful navigation, they reached a vertical shaft with ladder rungs embedded in the wall. Jack signaled for Max to wait, then climbed up to check the next level. When he determined it was clear, he returned. "I'll need to carry Max up," he said. "Can you manage mittens?" Susan nodded, securing the carrier to her back. Jack knelt beside his dog. "Up we go, buddy, just like training." He guided Max onto his shoulders, the dog balancing with practiced ease, and began the climb. They had just reached the upper level when they heard voices echoing through the tunnels, the harsh, guttural language of the Zarkon. "They're searching the maintenance system," Jack whispered. "We need to move faster." They hurried through the upper tunnels, Max now leading the way with greater urgency. The dog suddenly stopped, hackles rising, a low growl in his throat. "Someone ahead," Jack warned, pulling Susan into a side passage. They pressed against the wall as heavy footsteps approached. 2 Zarkon warriors passed their hiding spot, speaking in low voices. "The humans cannot have gone far," one said. "The commander wants them found before they can cause trouble." "Why not just eliminate them?" the second warrior asked. "The others are already secured. Orders are to take them alive. The commander wishes to make examples of them." When the warriors had moved on, Jack and Susan continued their journey, now even more cautious. They finally reached a section of tunnel that ran alongside the communication hub. They could see through a ventilation grate into the room beyond. Inside, 2 Zarkon technicians worked at control panels. "We need a distraction," Jack whispered. Susan reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. "Emergency beacon from my survival kit. If I activate it away from here, it might draw them out." Jack nodded. "Good thinking." Susan programmed the beacon and slid it down a side tunnel. After a few moments, it began emitting a high-pitched whine. The Zarkon technicians looked up, startled. Then one of them left to investigate. "One is still there," Jack said, studying the remaining technician. We need to. Before he could finish, Max tensed beside him, head turning sharply toward the way they had come. A moment later, Jack heard what the dog had already detected. More Zarkon approaching from behind. "We're trapped," Susan whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Jack made a quick decision. "I'll create a diversion. When the second technician leaves, get in there and send a message to Earth. Use Dr. Lieva's communicator to bypass their jammers." "What? About you?" "Max and I will lead them away, then circle back." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "If we get separated, head for the shuttle bay. The emergency vessels might still work despite the EMP." Susan nodded reluctantly. Jack tapped his special communicator. "I'll signal when it's safe to move." He turned to Max, running a hand along the dog's side in a specific pattern that was part of their training. "Distraction protocol, boy. Ready?" Max looked up at him, eyes alert and trusting. Jack felt a surge of pride in his partner. The Zarkon might mock their bond, but they had no idea of its true strength. "Go," he whispered. Jack and Max moved quickly back down the tunnel, deliberately making noise as they went. Behind them, the approaching Zarkon began moving faster. "Humans detected. In pursuit," one of them called. Jack led them on a chase through the maintenance tunnels, Max staying right beside him. They took random turns, doubling back occasionally to keep the Zarkon confused. Jack tapped his communicator, signaling Susan that the way should be clear. As they ran, a heavy metal door suddenly slid down from the ceiling ahead of them, cutting off their escape route. Jack skidded to a halt, Max stopping perfectly beside him. "End of the chase, human," came a familiar voice from behind. Jack turned slowly to see Sub-Commander Srel approaching, flanked by 4 warriors. The Zarkon officer held a neural disruptor, pointed directly at them. "Your primitive evasion tactics were amusing," Srel said, "but ultimately futile. Now you will join your fellow humans in containment." Max moved slightly forward, placing himself between Jack and the Zarkon. A low rumbling growl began deep in the dog's chest, not aggressive enough to provoke attack but clear in its warning. "Call off your beast," Srel demanded, raising his weapon higher. "He's just doing his job," Jack replied calmly. "Protecting his partner." Srel's inner eyelid flicked with annoyance. "Partner? It is a tool, nothing more. And soon you will both learn your proper place in the order of things." Jack stood his ground as Sub-Commander Srel and the Zarkon warriors closed in. Max remained positioned protectively in front of his human, the dog's growl growing slightly louder but still controlled. "Your last chance, human," Srel said, his scaled fingers tightening on the neural disruptor. "Surrender and restrain your beast or face the consequences." Jack slowly raised his hands. "Max, stand down," he said calmly. The dog immediately stopped growling, but remained alert and watchful. Jack knew he needed to buy time for Susan to send the distress signal. "A wise choice," Srel said, motioning to his warriors. "Take him." 2 Zarkon moved forward, one training a weapon on Max while the other roughly grabbed Jack's arm. The sub-commander spoke into his communicator. "We have one of the escaped humans, still searching for the female." Jack allowed himself to be pushed forward, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. Max walked precisely at his side, eyes never leaving the Zarkon who held his human. "Your pet is well trained," Srel observed as they marched Jack back through the maintenance tunnels. "It would have made a worthy hunting beast on our world." "He's not a hunting beast," Jack replied evenly. "He's a military service animal with specialized training." Srel made the grinding sound that passed for Zarkon laughter. "Your military allows dependent creatures in its ranks? No wonder humans required our protection upon joining the Confederation." As they turned a corner, Jack caught movement from a side passage, a flash of orange fur. Mittens was perched on a pipe, watching the procession with unblinking eyes. If the cat was here, Susan must be nearby. Jack needed to create another distraction without being obvious. He deliberately stumbled, causing the Zarkon guard to jerk, him roughly upright. "Clumsy human," the guard snarled. That small action was enough. Max's demeanor changed instantly. The dog's hackles rose and a deeper, more threatening growl rumbled from his chest. The sound echoed in the narrow tunnel, causing the Zarkon warriors to tense. "Control your animal," Srel demanded, raising his weapon. Before Jack could respond, a loud alarm blared through the station's communication system. A moment later, an automated voice began repeating, "Security breach in Section 7. All personnel report to emergency stations." Susan had succeeded. Section 7 was nowhere near their actual location. She was sending the Zarkon on a wild goose chase. The momentary distraction was all Jack needed. He twisted free from the guard's grip and shouted, "Max, protect!" What happened next shocked even Jack, despite his years of working with the dog. Max transformed from a calm service animal into a blur of focused power. The German Shepherd launched himself at the Zarkon, holding the weapon trained on Jack, striking with precision at the alien's weapon arm. 60 pounds of muscle and determination knocked the much larger alien off balance. The other warriors reacted, quickly, but Max was faster. The dog darted between them, always moving, never presenting an easy target. His military training was evident in every calculated movement. This was no wild animal attack, but a precisely executed defense protocol. "Shoot it," Srel roared, but the warriors hesitated, not wanting to hit each other in the confined space. In the confusion, a small orange streak shot from the side tunnel. Mittens, moving with feline grace, landed on the shoulder of a Zarkon warrior and dug in with all claws. The alien howled in surprise and pain, spinning around and colliding with his comrades. Susan's voice called from the darkness, "Jack, this way!" Taking advantage of the chaos, Jack ducked under a Zarkon arm and sprinted toward Susan's voice. Max immediately disengaged from the alien he had cornered and raced after his human, positioning himself between Jack and their pursuers. They found Susan in a small junction where several maintenance tunnels met. "I sent the distress signal," she said breathlessly, "and I managed to access their internal communication system. The shuttle bay is on lockdown, but there's another way out through the science section." "Lead the way," Jack said, checking Max quickly for injuries. The dog seemed unharmed and still fully alert. Mittens jumped from Susan's shoulder to the floor, tail twitching as she followed alongside Max. As they hurried through the tunnels, Jack glanced at Susan with newfound respect. "Nice work with Mittens back there. I didn't know therapy cats could be so tactical." Susan smiled slightly. "Most can't. Mittens was originally trained for the space agency's rodent control program before becoming my therapy animal. She's got some special skills." They reached a section where the tunnel widened into a maintenance hub. Large pipes ran along the ceiling, and various control panels lined the walls. Susan pointed to a hatch on the far side. "That leads to the science section. Dr. Lieva should be there. She sent a coded message saying she can help us." As they crossed the hub, Max suddenly stopped, ears forward, body rigid with attention. A second later, they heard heavy footsteps approaching from multiple directions. "They've figured out the diversion," Jack said, looking around quickly for options. "We're trapped." Susan pointed to a narrow crawl space between two large pipes. "Maybe not. That might lead somewhere." Jack shook his head. "Too small for us, but..." He knelt beside Max, speaking in a low, intense voice. "Seek help, boy. Find Lieva." He used a special hand signal, one they had practiced countless times in training. Max looked at him for a moment, almost as if he understood the gravity of the situation, then turned and leapt up to the crawl space, disappearing between the pipes. Susan opened Mittens' carrier. "You too. Follow Max." The cat needed no further encouragement, slipping into the same small opening with silent efficiency. "Will they really understand?" Susan asked, as they heard the Zarkon getting closer. "Max will find Lieva if she's anywhere in the station," Jack said with confidence. "He's trained to seek specific people by scent." The hatch on the opposite side of the hub suddenly burst open, and Commander Vexthor himself stepped through, flanked by 6 heavily armed warriors. At the same moment, Sub-Commander Srel and his group entered from the tunnel Jack and Susan had used. "Impressive evasion tactics," Vexthor said, his amber eyes glinting with cold amusement. "But ultimately futile." Jack and Susan stood back to back as the Zarkon surrounded them. Jack noticed that several of the warriors bore fresh scratches, or tears in their uniforms, evidence of their encounter with Max and Mittens. "Your Earth government has been contacted with our demands," Vexthor continued, stalking closer. "Until they surrender their claim to the Orion Belt, you and your delegation remain our guests." "Hostages, you mean?" Susan said sharply. Vexthor's scaled lips pulled back in a cold smile. "A crude term, but accurate." He turned to Jack. "Where is your beast?" "The tracker we planted on its collar shows it nearby." Jack felt a chill at this revelation but kept his expression neutral. "I have no idea. He's trained to find safety if we're separated." The commander stepped closer, towering over Jack. "No matter. We will find it eventually." He gestured to his warriors. "Take them to the detention area with the others." Two Zarkon seized Jack roughly, twisting his arms behind his back. As they forced him to his knees, one warrior pressed a neural disruptor against his temple. "This device can cause intense pain without permanent damage," Vexthor explained casually. "Where did you send your animals? What is your plan?" Jack remained silent, bracing himself for the pain to come. Susan struggled against her own captors, shouting at them to stop. The Zarkon warrior activated the disruptor at its lowest setting. Jack clenched his teeth as the first wave of pain shot through his skull. It felt like fire running along every nerve. "Primitive loyalty will not help you here," Vexthor said, watching Jack's suffering with clinical interest. "Tell us what signal you sent." And this stops. Through the haze of pain, Jack became aware of a new sound, a deep, menacing growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Even the Zarkon warriors looked around in confusion. Suddenly, a ventilation grate high on the wall burst outward, and Max launched himself into the room like a furry missile. But this was not the controlled, disciplined service animal from before. This was something the Zarkon had never witnessed. A creature transformed by the threat to its human. Max targeted the warrior holding the disruptor with unerring precision, his jaws clamping down on the alien's arm with enough force to make even the tough Zarkon scales crunch. The warrior shrieked in pain and dropped the weapon. In the moment of shock that followed, chaos erupted in the maintenance hub. The maintenance hub erupted into chaos as Max tore into the Zarkon warrior who had been torturing Jack. The alien screamed, dropping the neural disruptor and stumbling backward. Blood seeped from between his scales where Max's teeth had penetrated. "Commander," Vexthor stepped back in shock. "Impossible, how did it—" His words were cut short as an orange blur shot from the same ventilation shaft. Mittens landed on another warrior's face, claws extended. The cat was a frenzy of fur and fury, targeting the alien's sensitive eyes and forcing him to release Susan. The distraction gave Jack the opportunity he needed. He rolled away from his captors and grabbed the fallen neural disruptor. Though his head still pounded from the pain, his military training took over. He fired at the nearest Zarkon, sending the alien crumpling to the floor. Max moved like a trained soldier, always positioning himself between the threats and Jack. The dog darted, between warriors biting at vulnerable joints and tendons, then dancing away before they could retaliate. This was no mindless attack. Every move was calculated, aimed at disabling rather than killing. "Fall back," Vexthor ordered his warriors, genuine alarm in his voice for the first time. "Secure the exit." As the Zarkon retreated toward the hatch, Susan reached Jack's side. "Are you okay?" Jack nodded, the pain from the disruptor already fading. "Thanks to Max." He whistled a short command, and Max immediately returned to his side, alert but once again under control. Mittens leapt down from her perch on a pipe and padded over to Susan, seeming almost smug. But their victory was short-lived. More Zarkon were gathering outside the hatch, weapons drawn. They were still trapped. "Interesting tactics," Vexthor said from the safety of his warrior's protection. "Your beasts are more formidable than we anticipated, but this changes nothing." Jack held the neural disruptor ready. "It changes everything. You've just witnessed what happens when you threaten a human with their companion animal present." Vexthor's inner eyelid flickered rapidly, a sign of agitation. One small victory against unprepared warriors. We now know what to expect. Before Jack could respond, the opposite wall of the maintenance hub slid open, revealing Dr. Leva and several other Zalaran scientists. Behind them stood a contingent of Avari security officers, their feathered bodies adorned with the insignia of the Confederation Peacekeeping Force. Commander Vexthor, Dr. Leva said, her voice unusually stern for a Zalaran. By authority of the Galactic Confederation Council, you and your warriors are ordered to stand down immediately. Vexthor hissed in anger. This is a Zarkon matter. The Council has no authority here. An Avari officer stepped forward, his sharp beak clicking in disapproval. The Council has emergency authority when one member species takes hostile action against another. Your signal jammers have been disabled. We have been in contact with both Earth Command and your own government. Jack noticed that Max had moved to stand beside Dr. Leva, realizing that the dog had successfully completed his mission to find the Zalaran scientist and bring help. Mittens sat calmly at Susan's feet, grooming her paw as if nothing unusual had happened. The rest of the human delegation? Susan asked Dr. Leva. Safe, the Zalaran replied. Already released and under our protection. She turned her large eyes to Vexthor. Your government claims this was an unauthorized action, Commander. They have disavowed your seizure of the station. Vexthor's tail lashed in fury. Cowards, they approved this operation. The Avari officer stepped closer. Surrender your weapons, or we will be forced to take aggressive action. For a tense moment, Jack thought Vexthor might order his warriors to attack, but even the proud Zarkon commander could see the situation was hopeless. With a snarl of rage, he tossed his weapon to the floor. His warriors reluctantly followed suit. As the Confederation forces moved in to secure the Zarkon, Jack knelt beside Max, checking the dog for injuries. Good boy, he whispered, running his hands over the German shepherd's muscular body. The best partner anyone could ask for. Susan gathered Mittens into her arms, the cat purring loudly. Who would have thought our pets would save the day? Dr. Leva approached them, her blue skin rippling with emotion. Your animals are remarkable. When Max found me, he somehow communicated the urgency of the situation. He actually led us back here through the maintenance tunnels. Jack smiled, scratching behind Max's ears. He's trained to find help in emergencies, but what he did here went beyond training. He looked up at the Zalaran scientist. What happens now? The Confederation Council has called an emergency session, she replied. The Zarkon government is claiming Vexthor acted alone, trying to avoid sanctions. The situation in the Orion Belt will be resolved through proper diplomatic channels. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical checks, debriefings, and reunions with the rest of the human delegation. Ambassador Ellis insisted on hearing every detail of how Jack and Susan had escaped and how their animals had helped save them. When evening came, Jack found himself in the observation lounge with Max lying contentedly at his feet. The vast star field outside the viewport was peaceful now, with Confederation security ships visible in the distance. He heard footsteps and turned to see Commander Vexthor approaching, flanked by two Avari guards. The Zarkon leader was not in restraints but walked with the stiff posture of someone under close watch. Lieutenant Miller, Vexthor said, his voice subdued. The Confederation Council has granted me a moment to speak with you before my transport leaves for Zarkon Prime. Jack stood and Max immediately rose beside him, watchful but calm. Commander? Vexthor's eyes flickered to Max, then back to Jack. I have been instructed to offer apologies for my actions. The words clearly pained him. Apologies accepted, Jack said simply, though I think some should go to Max as well. The, Zarkon commander stared at the dog for a long moment. Your beast? He stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. Your companion showed remarkable courage and loyalty, qualities that would be valued even among the Zarkon. Jack nodded, recognizing how difficult this admission must be for the proud warrior. The relationship between humans and dogs goes back thousands of years, Commander. What you saw today wasn't just training. It was the result of generations of trust and cooperation. Vexthor seemed to struggle with a concept so foreign to his nature. Among my people, to rely on another is weakness. To trust is to invite betrayal. And yet, Jack said quietly, when you were in trouble, your warrior stood by you, even knowing it might mean disgrace. The Zarkon's inner eyelid flickered rapidly as he considered this. After a moment, he slowly extended his hand toward Max, palm down in an awkward approximation of a human greeting to a dog. Max looked up at Jack, who nodded slightly. The German shepherd sniffed the scaled hand cautiously, then to Jack's surprise, allowed Vexthor to briefly touch his head. Perhaps, the commander said as he withdrew his hand, there are forms of strength we have yet to understand. As Vexthor was led away by his guards, Susan joined Jack at the viewport, Mittens dozing in her carrier. Did I just see a Zarkon? Petting a dog? She asked in disbelief. Jack smiled. Strange days. Ambassador Ellis approached them, his face serious. I've just received word from Earth Command. Because of what happened here, the Confederation Council has proposed new regulations regarding service and companion animals. They'll now be recognized as official diplomatic personnel with protected status. About time, Susan said, glancing down at Mittens. There's more, Ellis continued. Several species have expressed interest in learning about human-animal bonds. The Zelaran Science Academy has requested permission to study the relationship in a cultural exchange program. Jack felt Max lean against his leg, a familiar, comforting pressure. What do you think, boy? Ready to be an interstellar ambassador? Max looked up at him with intelligent eyes that seemed to understand every word. In the days that followed, Jack noticed subtle changes in how the aliens interacted with the human pets aboard the station. The Avari began leaving treats for Mittens. The Marigi would stop and watch Max with curious ripples in their gelatinous bodies. Even some of the younger Zarkon could be seen observing from a distance, their usual contempt replaced by thoughtful consideration. One evening, as Jack and Max walked through the station's garden area, they came across a young Zelaran child, sitting alone looking sad. Max immediately approached, his tail wagging gently. The child's face lit up as the dog gently nuzzled her hand. Jack smiled as he watched the universal language of comfort and companionship bridge the gap between species. The aliens had mocked human pets until they witnessed what happened when a dog's owner was threatened. But now they were beginning to understand that what they had witnessed wasn't just protective instinct, but something far more profound. A partnership built on mutual trust, respect, and love. A lesson that perhaps the entire galaxy needed to learn.